Welcome to Mindfulness Manufacturing. My name is Trevor Blondeel. Spending 25 years in manufacturing, I discovered the real impact we have on turnover, communication, and the ability to manage change is how we show up. That's the essence of emotional intelligence. In each episode, we bring a guest or message to expand your skills, engage your people, and grow your organization. So let's jump in.
One of the great things about doing this podcast is the people that you meet and get introduced to. So I got to thank Mike Forehand for introducing me to LaVerne Roberts. She's a director of operations for a global consumer products company and has been in this business for 45 years. And she's the youngest person I have met that has worked that long in this industry and just a joy to be with. And welcome, LaVerne.
Oh, thank you, Trevor. Good to be here.
So what got you here? This is mindfulness manufacturing. There's different approaches to how people get in their career, but when Mike introduced me to you, he said, when you meet LaVerne, she's going to be a little bit different than what you're used to. And he didn't really go into that, but he also knew where my heart's at and my values are, and we share a lot of those common values in how we show up. And right away, you and I made that quick connection. When I met you, I'm like, I got to have you on the podcast. So what has separated you through your career? How do you get to a director of operations in a role like this?
Oh, that's a big question. Yeah. Okay. So let's go back a little bit because I didn't spend my entire 45 years in manufacturing. Okay. So I would say the first half of my career was spent in research and development. So I worked as a lab assistant, a technologist. I became a technology engineer, but I was all in R&D. And it wasn't until I graduated actually from night school, at university, and got my degree that I made the switch to move from R&D to operations. And ironically, as I'm telling this story, I'm thinking back to the day where I went into our general manager in R&D to let him know that I had applied for a position in operations. And I remember him looking across the table at me and go, why would you move from research and development into operations? But I was fascinated by the opportunity to take my experience in R&D, couple it with my new education at university, and then apply it in a whole new area of the business.
Okay, so we've established that you were crazy enough to want to get into operations, yet you defied the odds where we need more women in these roles to get better outcomes for manufacturing. So there's something that LaVerne took a different approach on. What was that?
I would say through my exposure into these other departments, I was building a network. Didn't even realize that I was doing it, but was building a network. And I had people, senior leaders in operations, that were already kind of like tapping into me and saying, hey, have you ever thought about relocating? Hey, have you ever thought about, doing this in manufacturing? And at the time I was, married. I still am married. I had 4 kids in high school, and the thought of having to relocate for an opportunity in operations was not something that, was appealing to me. So I was a little bit hesitant. But then, the time came in my career where my kids were grown up and I was, home by myself with my husband. And I had an opportunity to accept a position in manufacturing at one of our locations in North Carolina. And after 31 years of living in the same house and raising a family, my husband and I packed it all up. And I moved and became a plant manager.
Awesome.
In a packaging plant. And so that was like my first official stint in operations.
Okay, so was there any self-doubt there?
Oh, major.
So how do you get past that, LaVerne?
Okay.
How did you, because you did not have that depth of operations. Did you have people that weren't supportive? Because obviously you did have a lot of people that were supportive, which gave you the inspiration to make the move. What were the obstacles? How did you get past that, whether it was in your own head or other people that maybe weren't as supportive?
Yeah, so That's a good question too. So I would tell you that the obstacles were self-inflicted, for sure. Okay, any doubts were not from the people around me, my colleagues, my family, or anything like that. Any of the doubts that I had came from within. I remember when they offered me the position, it was such a big responsibility, and because I really didn't have like manufacturing background, okay, I remember the vice president saying to me, you can learn all that, LaVerne. You can learn that. You've demonstrated that you can learn this. It was really my leadership, how I engaged and worked with people, that was my strength. So I would say the vice president surrounded me with a really strong team so that I could learn from them, and I had a really strong mentor. And it was a personal challenge. And, I was doubting myself a little bit, but the funny thing is sometimes I didn't even know or realize that I didn't know things. I just push forward and figure things out, and it's not until sometimes after the fact I look backwards at where I was and where I am today, and I think to myself, how did I ever do that? How did I live through that? It's really an amazing story, and I hope that other people, have that experience.
So there will be other people listening and possibly in the same position. So what would you tell them, right? If someone else is listening to this, hearing that self-doubt. So what's the mindfulness techniques that you used to get to where you are?
I would say first of all, you have to work really hard. Okay. So when I never doubted my leadership ability, okay, or the fact that I could bring teams of people together to accomplish things, that was never my doubt. My doubts were more around just what I didn't know in manufacturing, creating a budget, closing out at the end of the month, and did you make money? Did you not make money? And then all the challenges that go in manufacturing, like, do I have the materials I need? Do I have my labor? Those were where my doubts were. So it was really about just having to do that extra hard work. So because I didn't have the background, I had to do, I would say, extra work. Like going to school almost. I had to do more homework. I spent probably more hours at work. I would say one of the things I probably could have done better was ask for help. Okay. I did. It's not because of pride that I didn't ask for help, but I was a little bit afraid of exposing the fact that I may not have known how to do something, or I didn't. And there's a great a book about imposter syndrome, and I would say that sometimes I felt like I was an imposter because I would act the part, I would play the part, but inside perhaps not as confident. But eventually I did learn, okay, and I had to learn the hard way. So I was able to take the knowledge gained from that hard work and, start applying it and hopefully run my plants better.
So you can see that now that it could have been a little bit easier, still need to work hard. All those things you talked about that you had self-doubt on are really skills that are actually a lot simpler to train and learn than it is leadership, getting people to follow you. How do you, like the people, when you work with people today, how do we identify someone that is maybe having that imposter syndrome and not asking for help? How do you approach that person? How do you help others that way? Because you know what it's like to feel like. Can you identify that?
Yeah. I'm just trying to like pull something forward, like even with my current team. I think what I was feeling, Trevor, about being a little bit of an imposter and then feeling like the doubts and not having all the background, the knowledge, I think that's probably more common than we are expressing.
Absolutely,
Okay? Do you
100%.
think? And I don't know. Let me ask you a question. Do you think it's men and women, or do you think that there's a particular one gender more so than the other? What do you think?
It seems to me that men are more ego-driven and ask for help even less, and are much more intentional on just kind of like going after for what they want and almost faking it more. And I do find that women are sometimes less intentional and better at a lot of those areas, because they want to be better and just aren't as intentional and loud about sometimes as what they want. But as being a guy that going through my own business here many times and still today doubt myself, right? That doesn't, I don't think it ever really stops. If you're always trying to get better, and if you don't have something in your mind that, hey, I don't know this and I need to get better, that keeps the drive going. So I like having a little bit of it, but where's that threshold where it's not helpful?
Right. So kind of back to your original question, though, about when I see someone who may be suffering somewhat like how I felt like suffering's probably too strong of a word. Oh, we'll use it. Suffering, because struggling. Yes, thank you. Struggling's a better word. It depends on the person. And I remember I took a leadership course. It was a week-long leadership course, and we were put into different settings where we were observed. We were taped and observed and then given feedback. And I remember at the end of the course, each of us met with the instructors and had like one-on-one coaching. And one of the things that they had shared with me during that was that what they observed is something that they don't see very often. And I'm not saying I'm special, okay, that's not what I mean. But that my leadership style is one such that I flex between leading from in front to leading from behind. Okay, so typically when you think of a leader, that's usually somebody who's in the front that's saying, hey, follow me, I'm the leader, and you lead from the front. But I don't always do that. So I kind of circle around and get from behind and kind of suggest. All right, so I'm leading from behind, kind of helping the person, let's say, that I'm trying to help, actually discover how to do it, how to help themselves without actually being in front of them. I don't know if that's making sense to you.
Absolutely. We want to support our team, ask them questions. That is the whole 2022 leadership. Anything you read and anything that's new that's being written is all about that. When you first get into a leadership role, or maybe when you first got in there, did you feel you needed to lead from the front more? Or was that always your style, and that's what's worked for you, that you could lead from behind?
I think you have to learn how to flex it. Okay, so I think in a new position, let's say, I think you have to lead from the front. For instance, in my most recent position, I moved from one plant to another. So I arrive here at this facility. I'm meeting a whole new group of people. It's a little bit, it's a different consumer product good, and I'm having a lot to learn, but I felt like they needed leadership and they needed somebody to lead them from the front, like initially, so I had to come in, I had to help create a vision, I had to help describe and help them see what it is we wanted to look like, in let's say 3, 4, 6 months, something like that. So it's important, I think, in the beginning that you lead from the front. But now I know my team. I've been here. I understand what all of their strengths are and where they have areas that we need to develop. And that's where I think I flex. And so now I go from being in front to getting behind. And as long as we're all still staying pointed towards what that vision and goal is, I like to also give some freedom to the people that I'm working with as I'm trying to coach and lead them from behind to like figure it out and own it themselves. But as long as we're still all marching in the same direction, that's, I think, where the empowerment comes from and the engagement. Because quite honestly, it's really not about LaVerne winning. Okay, I get the most satisfaction by seeing my team succeed.
Jim Collins, Good to Great, when he studied all the companies, the CEOs that said I all the time when they were talking versus we, the ones that said we were much more successful in the long term because it wasn't about them.
We'll have to replay this and see how many times I said I. I hope it wasn't a lot.
No, but today we're interviewing LaVerne, and that whole concept of, leading from behind, I love that. And the fact of, but sometimes we do need to flex. So how do you know, because there's a struggle out there of, there's still that micromanagement, there's still that leaders that struggle just letting go. Mm-hmm. So how do you know when you can let go? And hey, I can lead from behind now. What's your cues? Hey, the vision's there.
Mm-hmm. I think it's all about laying out those kernels, those seeds. It's first of all creating a relationship where you can have an honest conversation, and then I don't want to say test, but you lay out a seed and you see, is this person that I'm working with willing to take this little kernel that I'm giving them and do something with it, or ask more questions about it. Do they want to know more? Do they want my help? So I think that's part of it is, number one, build the relationship so you can have an honest conversation, and then put out some information, put out some suggestions, and then how it's received will be an indicator to you on like where your next step's going to be.
Let's go back even to the relationship part, because you can't plant that kernel if there's not a relationship, because there's not really that trust there. Like, do you care about me? Are you putting this kernel out there? So how do you build that relationship? Because I think that's even hard today. Mm-hmm. And it seems like it's even harder because our time always seems so crunched. And how do you do that? How do you build relationships?
Well, my husband said I'm a bridge builder. Okay.
I love that, the bridge builder.
And he always says that's one of the reasons I've been successful in my career is because I build bridges. So how do I build bridges? I think going back to something I said a little bit earlier, the building of the bridge, again, isn't so LaVerne can say she built the bridge. I built the bridge because I get excited about what's going to happen when that connection gets made. All right. And sometimes that connection has nothing to do with me, but it has a lot to do with another individual or group of individuals. So I think that first and foremost, okay, I'm a bridge builder, and how do I do it? Well, I think maybe one of the reasons I'm successful at it is the first thing is I don't do it from a point of myself. Mm-hmm. Okay, so when you're working with people and they can see that you're not in it for you, they're going to be much more willing to want to get to know me, because they're going to want to try to understand that. Because I don't think sometimes that's really typical. I mean, a lot of people are so out for trying to make their own name, and it's all about like me, mm-hmm. And that doesn't help build bridges. So I think, how do I build the bridge? It's because I come from a point where it's not about me, and just try to get to know that person, let them know they can trust me. Trust is so huge.
And so how do you get them to trust you? Are you, how much are it's, are you going out there and sharing more about yourself? Are they asking questions about you? And if someone's trying to build more bridges, we don't want to be that person that just kind of talks about themselves all the time, and because you want that person to know you and trust you. But so how do you build that?
It seems like it's easy for me. When you ask the question, I'm like really thinking like, how do I do it? I try to ask questions and get to know people. There's a fine balance too, okay? Because some people don't really want to share a lot, especially if they don't know you right away. So it's finding that kind of that sweet spot with just starting to get to know somebody, and sometimes it has nothing to do with work, right? So sometimes
100%.
It's like trying to find that common thing, like what's that one thing that you and I have? Like I try to find it, like, and then once you kind of can scratch it and you say, oh yeah, that's where we have something in common, something we connect with. It could be that our kids all played soccer and we were soccer coaches. It could be, hey, I love to garden. It could be, oh, I always wanted a red Mustang, whatever the case may be. But once you find that like sweet spot where you can have some commonality and you just have something and that you can talk about, it just starts there.
That goes back to the Barbara Fredrickson broaden and build theory of you got to have some type of a relationship, and whether it's just talking about gardening or whatever common ground you can have. But I would love to see just more conversations in manufacturing, and that's probably the mindfulness lesson out of this podcast that I'm taking away today is LaVerne and building bridges, and it starts with relationships.
I was going to also mention to you, as I was listening to you, that listening is also key. Okay, so it's building bridges. It's about creating relationships, but you have to be a really good listener.
So LaVerne, we're building bridges. We're creating relationships. What's the last thing our listeners leave with today? What's something that they can do tomorrow that you would recommend?
I think what I would like to impart on our audience is that you can, with enough determination and desire, achieve great things. I mean, you can move from being an hourly colleague on the production floor into a director role. Yeah, it took 45 years. But I mean, you can chart your journey, and you should work at the self-doubt that you have, work past it, because we're a lot stronger than we think. We're a lot smarter than we think,
And I want to thank you, LaVerne, for leading manufacturing in this way, from the heart and kindness. And I believe that our industry, when we work hard, when we're honest, when we're mindful, it can be a really fun place to work. And it's just been a blessing to meet you and have you on the podcast. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Hey folks, appreciate you taking the time to join us today. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone. Haven't subscribed yet? Do it now. Remember, if you want results, the key is increasing your awareness of how you show up.